understand that God loves the Muslim. God loves Muslims. And you might be surprised to know that there are many Muslims in the Middle East that are coming to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ in these last days. I'm personally of the belief that it will be the people in the Middle East, my people, that will constitute the fulfilling of the time of the Gentiles. This is why I'm so conflicted. Just hear me out. I'm conflicted on two fronts, and the first of which has to do with the delusional secular media. It's becoming increasingly more difficult to watch, forget CNN, even Fox. They bring on these so-called experts, and I just sit there and I just think to myself, they're so deceived. They're so blind. Here's an example. On the screen, you'll see this Arut Sheva article. It was published last Thursday, the day after the attacks in France. It was about Jim Clancy. He's a senior CNN news anchor, and he goes off on Israel in what they dubbed a, quote, bizarre anti-Israel tirade after the Paris attack. Here's some of what it had to say. CNN's veteran news anchor and international correspondent Jim Clancy has provoked controversy after a series of bizarre anti-Israel tweets following Wednesday's deadly terrorist attack in Paris. Journalists throughout the world and from across the political spectrum reacted with horror at the slaughter of 12 people at CharLIE HEBDO's Paris offices. Clancy, however, took exception to the claim that the magazine was attacked for insulting Islam, claiming instead that the cartoons never mocked the prophet. They mocked how the cowards tried to distort his word. Several of his Twitter followers, with some very colorful language, reacted with shock at his response, with some calling into question his objectivity as a journalist who frequently reports from the Middle East. This is what my dad, when he was alive, used to call propaganda. Propaganda. The second conflict I'm having has to do with the posture that the Christian community is taking in response to the truth of Islam. It seems that either the response is to bury one's head in the sand in denial, or one of hoping that somehow the U.S. can defeat IS. I have to say that as long as we have a president who says the future, quote, must not belong to those who slander the prophet of Islam, close quote, that response is delusional and ignorant. I suppose this report last Wednesday, the same day that it happened, it was from the Weekly Standard. Should come as no surprise. The headline, White House, America needs to redouble effort to explain true tenets of Islam. Here's just some of what they published. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest. Have you ever seen this guy in a press conference? Very interesting, very interesting. He explained to reporters that the United States needs to, quote, redouble efforts to explain, quote, what the tenets of Islam actually are. He made the comments in response to a question about how the U.S. might respond to the terror attack in France. If this weren't bad enough, French President Hollande, and I was actually in my office, and I watched this, and as God is my witness, I thought, there's no way I heard him say what I think I heard him say. And so I went online to find the text, and sure enough, there it was. Addressing the nation of France and really the entire world, he said, and I quote, "These terrorists, these fanatics, have nothing to do with the Muslim religion." I tell you, as long as the French president says that, and our president says what he says, I think we're kidding ourselves. I think we're kidding ourselves if we have this notion that somehow Islam will be stopped, IS will be defeated. It will not happen. It will not happen. I need you to hang in there with me for a bit. I'm going to go in a direction here that I really struggled with and prayed about and deem it necessary to speak and say. This French president has the same demonic playbook as the rest of the world, and it's as pro-Islam as it is anti-Israel. And I find it rather interesting and even peculiar that just 8 days prior to last Wednesday's Islamic terror attack, France, along with the likes of Russia and even Jordan, sided with the Palestinian resolution that imposed dictates on Israel, compelling the Jewish state to withdraw to the indefensible June 4th, 1967 borders by no later than, interesting, we've talked about this before, 2017. Very interesting. This, to me, is further evidence that the strong delusion that Paul writes about in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 11, I really believe with all my heart that it is in fact already here. At least in part. That's the only explanation I can come up with to wrap my mind around how it is that otherwise very intelligent people could say something so foolish and believe it. That's the only explanation. They have been the recipients of this strong delusion. And if that's the case, and I believe it is, then everything is perfectly on God's prophetic schedule, and the Lord's return for His bride is closer than ever. However, if it's not, and let's just say theoretically somehow Islam is stopped and or destroyed, well, then I would suggest that maybe the Lord's return for His bride is not that close. What? What do you mean? Well, this is why I need for you to hang in there with me. The U.S. is the great Satan to Islam, and Israel is the little Satan to Islam. But here's the problem. God only has a covenant with Israel, not the U.S. He has an everlasting covenant with Israel, not the U.S. You know what that means? That means that God will defend His people, the Jewish people, and miraculously protect them from all of their enemies, just as He has throughout mankind's history, chiefly during the 7-year tribulation. Now, I point this out for this reason. America has no such promise. And as such, I think it might explain the conspicuous absence of the United States in Bible prophecy. I know that saying this jams some people's gears, so to speak, but Nowhere in the pages of Bible prophecy will you find the United States mentioned. Something happens to the once most powerful nation on planet Earth. Conversely, Israel is not just mentioned, replete throughout the scriptures in both the Old and New Testament. Israel is not only mentioned, Israel is the focus of all prophecy. It's central to all prophecy. In other words, an absent U.S. and an all-present Israel would seem to indicate that Islam somehow, at some time, succeeds in destroying the United States. They will not destroy Israel.